welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. Our special guest is Helen Hitchcock, editor of the Adoremus Bulletin. The topic on this program is the new Adoremus Hymnal published by Ignatius Press. And we're here with you, Helen, on the set of our Theology Roundtable program, which you will be a guest on. And we wanted to catch up with you as best we could so we could talk to you about the new Adoremus Hymnal. And this is the one a lot of people see us use here at EWTN for the Mass,
That's right.
And people have been able to order it so that they can follow along. We get a lot of people who do that, actually.
Good, good. What's new about it is that, of course, because of the new translations that we're about to receive, the new Mass in both Latin and English is in the new hymnal. So we had to do it anyway. But while we were about it, we had some people who have used it noticed that there were some missing numbers in certain places.
Okay.
So we have added new hymns, both in Latin and in English. And some of those new hymns are very old hymns, and but there's actually one that was just written a few years ago. But they're in a very beautiful style and musical style, united to very true words.
Okay.
So it's a link with truth and beauty there.
Right, because one of the great things about the Adoremus Hymnal, it's not like one of these ones when you're, sometimes I can say in my own personal experience in certain parishes around the country, you're sitting there singing some song and you're reading what the lyrics are actually saying and you're wondering, is this even Catholic?
Yeah, well, yeah, there is a little bit of that. You will not find anything like that in the Adoremus Hymnal.
Right.
A few years after the council, Pope Paul VI issued a booklet that he sent to every bishop in the world. It was called Jubilate Deo. And it had some basic Latin chants in it for hymns and so on. And that was ignored, completely ignored in the mid-70s, as you will not be surprised to know. But gradually, there's been a revival of interest in chant, both in English and in Latin, in very recent years.
And why do you think that is?
I'm not sure. I think that possibly the Cultural Revolution has kind of waned and people are on a different page now. You notice this even in secular architecture, a difference in the way it looks. And you see a difference in the way...
A certain amount of tradition coming back.
Right, even in secular architecture and certainly in church architecture and so on.
Well, I think there's an appreciation of beauty that people looking back see was lost.
I think that's right. I think that we realize that we're in kind of shaky territory and we want some firm foundation. So one of the links to that is music. And I think that you see the reason why people are interested in the revival of these kinds of music is that the whole culture is in danger of being lost.
Now you mentioned when we started this off, you used the phrase, and it talks about here on the Adoremus Hymnal, because you got a website and everything for this, which we'll put up the web address so people can go and see that. But it contains the new English translation of the Ordinary of Mass, which will be introduced throughout the United States, first Sunday of Advent, 2011. So we're right there. As in the original edition, the complete Latin text of the Ordinary Mass is also included. When people hear that it's a new translation, first of all, there's a lot of people out there who don't know anything's going on. Second of all, people going, what do you mean? So is it going to be like a transition from the old Latin Mass to the Paul VI Mass? This is like a new Mass being translated? What do we mean by saying that? That is a
mistake. And a lot of people, Doug, don't even realize that the Mass, the English version of the Mass that we've been praying, the original is in Latin. A lot of people think that was a new Mass made up in English and don't realize that it is a translation of the Latin. The translation that we've been using, it was done very, very rapidly. It was done very quickly right after the council, and almost everybody wanted to redo it after a certain period of time, but it never got done. And in 2002, Pope John Paul issued a third typical edition of the Roman Missal with new saints added and a few little things like that. But basically it's the same. We're praying, some of the prayers that we're praying in the Latin version have been prayed for over 1,000 years. But the new translation is now the accurate and much more reverent sounding translation that everybody
Right.
had hoped for.
And that's what we've been talking about all year long here on EWTN on the Theology Roundtable with Colin Donovan,
Yeah.
talking about how that is being implemented and what exactly it means so that people can see what the changes will be, because obviously they'll be participating in some of them.
Right, exactly. And one of the ways that we're going to be participating in it is with more singing of the Mass itself, not just maybe a hymn at the beginning and a hymn in the middle and a hymn at the end, but singing the actual Mass, like the Lord have mercy and like the Holy, Holy.
Right.
And we'll be singing.
And the congregation will be singing.
The congregation will be singing.
Well, that's great. You
as
know,
well.
sometimes I've thought, you know, over the years with some of the singing of some of the parts of the Mass, it's really nice. But it got to be in some cases that it was all being sung either by the choir or by the leader of song, and the people out there were just doing like a refrain,
Yeah.
like in the Glory or something like that. I felt like, you know, that idea of the people saying it as a prayer for themselves and reinforcing in themselves what they believe was kind of being lost sometimes.
That's the thing. Now, I can't even remember the last time I was at a regular church service where the creed was sung. It just hasn't been done. But it's intended to be sung. And one of the things I think that is an interesting phenomenon, most of you realize this, is that when you link words with music, it implants itself in your brain in a unique way, so that whenever you hear a piece of a tune, the words come back, even if you think you forgot them.
Forgotten it all together, and all of a sudden
Exactly.
it starts to come
And
back.
all of a
right?
sudden, it's there. And there must be a specialized chunk of brain that links music and words. But when those words will be linked to the music, then that will be a way of really deepening our understanding of and our appreciation for and participation in the Mass itself.
Now, we have the new Adoremus Hymnal coming out. There's also something called the Adoremus Bulletin, which you're the editor of, which you mentioned at the top.
Right.
You talk about that. Now, Adoremus itself is listed as a Society for the Renewal of the Sacred Liturgy, and it started back in 1995.
Right.
So this has been ongoing for quite a while.
Yes.
Why did you feel the need at the time to start it back then? And have you seen progress? And is this version of the Adoremus Hymnal indicative that things are getting better?
Yes, 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 and yes.
Oh, good. Okay. That's good to know.
When we started Adoremus, we realized that there was an ongoing problem with translation, both scriptural translation and liturgical translation. The lectionary for Mass, the translations of the Bible that have just been burgeoning, and there were beginning to be very obvious ideological forces at work on making these translations.
Like inclusive language, remember?
So-called inclusive
Right.
language, right. And the language is a very powerful way it's the way we can convey anything. And if you can change the language to express something that is slightly off base, then you change the way people think about that thing. And this was the objective of some of the translations that were being done of Scripture, so that it wouldn't be offensive to feminist women, for example. So we eradicate, we invent new words for God. We don't refer to him as he or father, we refer to God as father, mother, or something. This got pretty wacky
Right.
in the late 80s and early 90s, and this was a problem that we could see. And that's one of the things that led to the formation of Adoremus in 1995.
And that was...
and the publication of the Adoremus Bulletin.
and at that time, was that Father Fessio and Father Pekorski? Were they the ones who...
Father Fessio and Father Pekorski and I were...
Right.
sort
And
of
are you still
collaborated.
the people behind Adoremus?
Yeah.
Okay.
Most of what Adoremus, most of what's visible that Adoremus does is on our website and the monthly publication of the Adoremus Bulletin. And
Right,
we have
and you
been-
actually have, not only is there's actually an online edition of this then? Or
well,
parts of it are online?
We post most of the articles online, but we don't post the letters and things
We'll have
like
that address up as well, so people
Yeah.
can go to that and find out.
Yeah, it's so the main articles are online because we regard this as part of our responsibility
Right.
in the new evangelization, is getting information to people. And the internet has been a great tool.
Have you
for
been
that.
surprised over the years how many different people were actually interested in these topics, even people beyond, let's say, people who are normally involved with church affairs, that the average pew sitter, per se, would have had an interest in these kind of topics?
Yeah, that is interesting. It has happened. We get a lot of letters. We're only able to publish a relatively small percentage of them in the bulletin, but we get a lot of letters, and some people will be just scrolling around on the internet and happen to maybe some holiday like Halloween or something, and they will happen to link to the Adoremus website or the Women for Faith and Family website, which has a liturgical calendar on it, and then suddenly they get interested in what they're, and it is, you've had this experience, of course.
Sure. Well, the thing I always thought too is that a lot of times in reading it, it's always interesting sometimes to hear the average person, the average Catholic out there, who just kind of has had something happening in their parish or and felt, this doesn't seem quite right to me, and I've asked about it and I've been told, well, don't worry, it's fine. And they bring that up to try to see, is this okay that it's being said this way, or that this part is being omitted, or something like that, right?
Yeah, we get that a lot. And for that reason, because I try to be responsible, I have learned a lot because I have to do a lot of research. For what may be a one paragraph response that we print in the bulletin, I may have to do 3 or 4 hours of research.
Well, because a lot of these things aren't just straight black and white issues, right? I mean, sometimes
That's true.
they can be, but other times there's a lot of latitude.
And people maybe want a rule that says you can't do this.
Right.
And sometimes there's not any rule explicitly, but it was inferred from other kinds of things.
Right, and also I always assume sometimes, it's left up to a certain discretion of the priest in this particular situation, but it's clear, like you're saying, from what all the other rules are, it doesn't say you can't do this, but clearly there's no intimidation anywhere that...
Yeah, sometimes I say, it doesn't say, there's no rule that says the priest can't stand on his head on the altar either.
Right. Clearly doesn't mean that that's what a person of goodwill would take out of that, right?
So usually we have laws and rules when there is in secular world as well as in the church, when there's serious infraction and there needs to be, and there's confusion, it needs to be clarified.
Would you say over the years, based upon that and the email you're getting, that things are getting better out there?
It's kind of hard to say. But I will say this, 10 years ago, having this new, good, accurate, reverent-sounding, religious-sounding translation of the Mass would have been almost unthinkable.
Right.
And the same, when we did the Adoremus Hymnal, we wanted to get something out there. I think that, and there are other things as well that have contributed to a change in the atmosphere. And of course, the leadership of the last 2 popes is matchless.
Right. Clearly the Holy Spirit at work. One of the things that struck me too is obviously our present Holy Father has promoted the idea of the Latin Mass being available everywhere and for people who are attached to it, and the beauty of it, and that people can get a lot out of it. And certainly we've featured Latin Masses and have had them on the network and have had programs about it, etc. With the motu proprio, etc. Now, I did notice on one thing in the original Adoremus layout, and I was wondering if there was a tension here, in the sense that Adoremus believes that the liturgical reform legitimately mandated by the Second Vatican Council cannot be accomplished by a return to the pre-conciliar liturgy. And so that would be the Tridentine Mass, right, the Latin Mass. So how does that, because it does seem that there are some people who firmly believe the best thing we could do is just admit this didn't work, let's go back to the Tridentine Mass, which the Pope is saying is perfectly fine for people to go to the Tridentine Mass. But that's not what Adoremus is focused on, right?
No, and it's not what the Pope is focused on either. We take really a very strong cue from the work of Pope Benedict. He's one of the best known liturgists in the world, really, as a liturgical theologian. That's not the only thing he does, but he's taken an enormous interest in that, and in music in particular. And so we take our, we follow we follow the Pope on this. And he, by permitting Summorum Pontificum, by Summorum Pontificum, permitting a wider use of the Latin Mass, we also have the Ambrosian Mass, we have other rites in the church, and he, at almost the same time as he extended the Latin Mass, he established, in principle, the Anglican use for the Anglican ordinariate. So I think what is the common denominator here is the truth and an authentic enculturation. And it's not exactly the same all over the world. The truth can be expressed beautifully and united with a spirit of energizing and deepening our apprehension of the faith and our making it personal. And I think that that's really what we're at.
Yeah, and that there's not a mutual exclusivity here.
That's
and that's
right.
the idea that the Pope is trying to show us too. But sometimes we do tend to get into that sometimes in the church where
To the extent that
the way
the
I
church-
like it, that's the way it should be for everybody, right?
To the extent that the church is human, it's full of failure. Thank goodness the church is not merely a human creation.
Right.
But so
Holy Father said some of that when he was in Germany not too long ago. Kind of talked about that. That we have to realize that those things happen inside the church, and it can't take away from all the good that obviously the church is doing.
Yeah, that
Just because there's some
certainly.
shortcomings. Well, let me ask you. EWTN, obviously, Mother was a big supporter. Throughout the '90s and in the '90s, talking about the renewal of the Mass, and certainly having Latin in the Mass, and showing that the Novus Ordo can be done in a wonderfully sacramental way, and that people can get a lot out of it. And certainly we have promoted the Adoremus Hymnal. Now the new one coming out, we're happy to promote as well. And we use it here, and viewers have used it. Has it found wide usage throughout the country? Is it expanding the number of people and parishes that are using the Adoremus Hymnal?
Actually, I don't know the answer to that, Doug, because we're the editors of it, but the publisher is Ignatius Press, and they really keep track of the sales. What we do know is that there are a lot of parishes who have been using it.
Oh, great. Okay.
And I have recently been getting emails and telephone calls and so on saying, when is this going to be ready? We really want to see it. It's going to be, I think, very significantly improved when it gets out. But I think it's good the way it is. And the people, we've left the numbering the same, so people who want to keep using their old hymnals can use the same, the numbers are the same.
Right.
It won't have the additional, the old ones obviously don't have the new stuff, but the numbers are the same. So if you say hymn number 363, it'll be the same.
Same one.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, great. So people who are out there.
And another new thing that we're doing is because of the new technology that we have.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Go ahead.
We're going to put MP3 recordings of everything online so that anybody can listen to them. So the choir,
And what would be the benefit of that?
well, the choir director who's got an unfamiliar hymn can take, or an individual for that matter, but if it's an unfamiliar hymn, they can, or a new mass setting, which will be unfamiliar, they can download it onto their computer, take it to choir practice with them, and play it so everybody can hear it.
This is what it's supposed to sound like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we had CDs recordings of the old hymnal, but that was, there were 4 CDs. And
Right. It's amazing how we think CDs are bulky and
yeah, I know.
really behind the times
And
now.
you can still buy those CDs, and it's a good record. But we decided that we would put them all on MP3 files, so there will be an index. There are actually 2 promotional websites. Ignatius just put up a new site, and it's very, very well done, and it's got a lot of information. There's some more information on the Adoremus Hymnal's website, too, which has the introduction and has a complete list of the index on it now with the additions in bold, so you can tell what's added. So people can look at both.
Now there are actually 3 separate editions. How does that work?
That's right. There was an organ edition, and the new organ edition will have bigger pages, so it'll be easier for an organist to
So it's
use.
actually for an organist actually to use during.
Right.
I see.
And the organ edition does not have the text of the Mass in it. It's got the indexes and all the music in modern notation. the editions for the people, there's a standard edition and a melody only edition. And for the chanted stuff that's supposed to be in unison, the music will be written in neumes, Gregorian neumes, which is actually easier for people who don't read music because they can just follow how it goes up and down.
I see, okay.
But it is in modern notation for musicians in the organ version.
Right,
So
but
there'll
the
be
first one, kind of the
standard
automatic,
edition
that's
will
what people would,
Yeah, the
average
standard
person would
edition will
want.
have the harmony in it so that people in the pew can actually become the parish choir.
Right.
Because a lot of people who can sing, but they may not be able to follow the melody because it's out of their range or something, so they just don't sing at all. So all of the harmony will be in the standard
Well, let me ask you
edition.
that. I mean, in right now with certain aspects of the Our Father can get sung, or different parts of the Glory can be sung. But what I find sometimes distracting is if you go from one parish to the other, they're singing it to a different melody. And it's very confusing, and you see people kind of trying to figure out, well, where am I going with this?
That has always been a problem, and that's one reason why the abolition of choirs was so sad, because the choir knew what they were singing, and we could listen, and listening is participating, as we know. But that's still going to be a problem until we learn the new things. However, the International Commission for English in the Liturgy that did the translation has provided an English chant-based text, to the new text, a chant-based tune that will be in the missalettes, and it's pretty good. And that people will there will be one text that everybody will, one musical setting that everybody will have access to, that is required to be put in all the hymnals. So even if your parish has got 4 different mass settings in English, which is good in a way, because you have different occasions and you need a different tune. But that there will be one that is provided for the whole church, so that, and that will be all the English-speaking church, not just in the U.S.
I'm just wondering, this is a little off topic specifically for us talking about the new edition of the Adoremus Hymnal, but there's been some rumors out there as well that maybe some of the songs and tunes that have been allowed over the years, let's say coming out of the 60s and the 70s, where, like I alluded to earlier, maybe some of the language is a little misleading or doesn't seem quite to line up with Catholic theology, or it's kind of sloppy. Are some of those things going to be weeded out? Is there any movement, officially to have some of that?
That's a little bit difficult, because what you've got is large publishing companies that are committed to their particular stable of composers and the royalties that they get from certain music being used. So it's not an easy thing to say, okay, we're not going to do this anymore.
Okay.
We are not going to sing a new church into being, and we're not going to I the Lord,
Me, and I, right?
Me, and I, yeah.
Right.
It's not going to disappear overnight. And for all kinds of reasons, some people have very fond associations with certain things. It might have been sung at Mama's funeral or something.
Right, that's a good point, right.
And so that won't disappear soon, I don't think. The bishops several years ago did try to, and the new document Liturgiam Authenticum about translation that the Holy See issued did mention that there should be an accepted list of hymns. So anything that's doctrinally wrong would go. That has been, in 2006, the bishops worked on a directory, but it wasn't very specific because the trouble is they've got these publishers. And the publishers sometimes are, very closely related to the diocese, and it's tricky. and difficult. So it's not going to happen
Right.
overnight.
It's like most
but
things
it's
that are
just going to get better.
Right. But there is a sense that that's being looked at, right?
It is. It is really. It may take another generation, but
well, the church moves slowly.
Well, that's true. That's true. It's remarkable how rapidly the church has moved on the translations. From
Right, if you look back, it's amazing.
10 years ago, you
from where you
couldn't
thought
imagine
it would be.
where we would be now.
Well, we're just out of time speaking here with Helen Hull Hitchcock. Thank you so much, Helen. Doug Keck here, a special on location, Helen Hull Hitchcock, editor of the Adoremus Bulletin. Topic is the new Adoremus Hymnal, published by Ignatius Press, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. Check it out. It's great for home use for our viewers here at EWTN. I'm Doug Keck. Join us next time right here on EWTN's Bookmark.